Section 15 of a cruising voyage around the world. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by S.S. Kim, Seoul, South Korea. A cruising voyage around the world by Woods Rogers of California. December 24. About 4 yesterday afternoon, we got to an anchor in Port Segura in 25 fathom water, found the Marquis in a sailing posture, and all the company much overjoyed at our unexpected good fortune. In the night I felt something clog my throat, which I swallowed with much pain, and suppose it's a part of my jawbone or the shot, which we can't yet give an account of. I soon recovered myself, but my throat and head being very much swelled, have much ado to swallow any sort of liquid for sustenance. At 8 the committee met aboard us and agreed that the Duchess and Marquis should immediately go out and cruise 8 days for the other ship, being in the hopes she had not passed us. In the meantime we and the prize stay and refit, and dispatch the prisoners away in the bark, and if we could get security from the Guiaquil hostages for the payments of the remainder of the ransom, to let them go likewise. We lie landlocked from the east by north to the south-southeast, distant from the easternmost point about 4 miles, from the southernmost rock about half a mile, and near the same distance offshore. The committee we held resolved as follows. On board the Duke riding in Port Segura on the coast of California, December 24, 1709. Having information from the prisoners taken on board the prize the 22nd instant, bound from Manila to Acapulco, that they came out in company with another ship bound for the same port, from which they parted in latitude 35 north. It is resolved that Captain Courtney in the Duchess and Captain Cook in the Marquis do forthwith go out upon a cruise for 8 days to look after the said ship. Signed by the majority of the council. Captain Courtney, Cook, and the officers of the council would not agree that the Duke and Duchess should go out, as I desired, with most of the men belonging to the Marquis divided between them, in order to cruise for the biggest Acapulco ship, which we in hopes had not passed us, and by being thus well manned, might, if they meet a carrier, by a boarding at once, and that in the meantime the Marquis with a very small number of men might be sufficient to stay in the port and send off the bark with the prisoners. But there having been some reflections amongst the sailors, because the Duchess did not engage this prize before the Duke came up, it made them obstinate to cruise for her without us, and the officers of our consort being agreed, made the majority of our council, so that according to the foregoing committee, we are obliged to stay in the harbour against our will. December 25. Last night the Duchess and Marquis went out. We put 10 good hands aboard the Duchess, that if they should be so fortunate as to see the great ship, they might be the better able to attack her. In the morning we began to put parts of the goods aboard the bark into the prize, in order to send the prisoners away. Captain Dover and Mr. Stretton, who were aboard the prize, came to me, and we all agreed to send off the Guiaquil hostages. Captain of the Manila ship, who was a French chevalier, having given us 5 bills of exchange for the same, payable in London for $6,000, being 2,000 more than the ransom money, for which we allowed him the benefit of the bark and cargo. The captain and hostage giving us certificate that it was a bargain concluded at their own request, and very much to their advantage. Sir John Pitchberty being, we hope, man of honour, will not suffer his bills to be protested, since we have so generously trusted him, though a prisoner, without a hostage which is always demanded for less sums. December 25. We placed 2 sentries to keep good lookout upon the top of a hill, with orders if they saw 3 sail in the offing to make 3 wharfs with their colours. December 26. Yesterday afternoon the sentry made 3 wharfs, and we immediately sent the yawl to them for better satisfaction, and found there were 3 sail out at sea, upon which we immediately put all the prisoners aboard the bark, taking away her sails, and fetched our men aboard, leaving only 22 hands belonging to us aboard the prize to help refit and look after her. The prisoners, who were about 170, being secured aboard our bark, without arms, rudder, sails, or boat, and moored near a mile from our prize, a few more of our men than was sufficient to give them victuals and drink, might have guarded them very safely. Yet, for the more security, we left a lieutenant of each ship, and the above men well armed aboard our prize, and immediately weighed in order to go and assist our consort to attack the great ship, which then came in sight. Captain Dover thought fit to go on board the prize, and exchange post with one of the lieutenants that guarded the prisoners, and sent him to us in his stead. I was in so weak a condition, and my head and throat so much swelled, that I yet spoke in great pain, and not loud enough to be heard at any distance, so that all the rest of the chief officers and our surgeons would have persuaded me to stay in the harbour in safety aboard our prize. We weighed our anchors and got under sail by 7 o'clock. We saw lights several times in the night, which we took to be our consort boats, making false fires. In the morning at daybreak, we saw 3 sail to windward of us, but were so far distant that we could not make which were our consort and which the chase, till about 9 o'clock, when we saw the Duchess and chase near together, and the Marquis standing to them with all the sail she could crowd. We made what sail we could, but were leeward of them 3 or 4 leagues, and having a scant wind, made little way. At noon they bore southeast of us, being right to windward about 3 leagues. In the afternoon we saw Marquis come up with the chase, and engage pretty briskly, but soon fell to leeward out of cannon shot, and lay a considerable time, which made us think she was some way or other disabled. I ordered the pinnace to be manned, and sent away to her, that if what we suspected proved true, and we had not wind to get up with them before night, our boat might dog the chase with the signals till the morning, that she might not escape us and the other ships. But before the boat could get up with them, the Marquis made a sail and come up with the chase, and both went to it again briskly for 4 glasses and upward. Then the ship which we took to be the Duchess stretched ahead to windward of the enemy, I suppose to fix her rigging or to stop her leaks. Meanwhile the other kept her in play till she bore down again, and each firing a broadside or 2 left off, because 'twas dark. They then bore south of us, which were right in the wind's eye, distant about 2 leagues. By midnight we were pretty well up with them, and our boat came aboard, having made false fires, which we answered. They had been aboard the Duchess and Marquis, and told me the former had her foremost much disabled, and the ring of anchor shot away, with several men wounded, and 1 killed, having received a shot in their powder room, several in their upper works, but all stopped. They engaged the ship by themselves the night before, which was what we took to be the boat's light, being out of the hearing of the guns. At that time they could perceive the enemy was in disorder, her guns not being all mounted, and consequently their netting deck and close quarter unprovided, so that had it been my good fortune in the Duke to accompany the Duchess, as I desired, we all believe we might then have carried the great ship, or if they in the Duchess had thought of taking most of the men out of Marquis, who did not sail well enough to come up to their assistance at first, they alone might very probably have taken her by boarding at once. before the Spaniard had experienced our strength, being afterwards so well provided as encouraged them to lie driving, and give us all opportunity to board them when we pleased. Captain Cook sent me word that the Marquise had fired near all her shot and powder, but had escaped very well both in mast, rigging, and men. I sent our boat with 3 barrels of powder and shot in proportion, and Lieutenant Fry to consult our consort how to engage the enemy to the best advantage of the break of day. The chase had made signals to our ship all day and night, because she took us for her consort, which we had in possession, and after it was dark had edged away to us, else I should not have been up with her, having very little wind, and that against us. In the morning, as soon as 'twas day, the wind veering at once put our ship about, and the chase fired first upon the Duchess, who by means of wind veering was the nearest to the enemy. She returned it smartly. We stood as near as possible, firing as our guns came to bear, but the Duchess being by this time toward the Spaniard hawse, and firing very fast, those shots that missed the enemy flew from the Duchess over us, and betwixt our masts, so that we ran the risk of receiving more damage from them than from the enemy, if we had lain on our quarters and crossed astern, as I designed, while the enemy lay driving. This forced us to lie alongside, close aboard her, where we kept firing round shot, and did not load with any bar or partridge, because the ship's sides were too thick to receive any damage by it, and no man appearing in sight, it would only have been a cloak to the force of our round shot. We kept close aboard her, and drove as she did as near as possible. The enemy kept to their close quarters, so that we did not fire our small arms till we saw men appear, or a port open. Then we fired as quick as possible. Thus we continued for 4 glasses. About each time we received a shot in the mainmast, which much disabled it. Soon after that, the Duchess and we firing together, we came both close under the enemy, and had like to have been all aboard her, so that we could make little use of our guns. Then we fell astern in our berth alongside, where the enemy threw a fireball out of one of her tops, which, lighting upon our quarter-deck, blew up a chest of arms and cartouche boxes, all loaded, and several cartridges of powder in the steerage, by which means Mr. Vanbrugh, our agent, and the Dutchman were very much burnt. It might have done more damage had it not been quenched as soon as possible. After we got clear of each other, the Duchess stood in for the shore, where she lay braced to, mending her rigging, and so on. The Marquise fired several shots, but to little purpose, her guns being small. We were close aboard several times afterwards, till at last we received the second shot in the mainmast, not far from the other, which rent it miserably, and the mast settled to it, so that we were afraid it would drop by the board, and having shattered our rigging very much, we sheered off and brought to, making a signal to our consort to consult what to do. In the interim we got ordinary fishes for a port to the mainmast, and fastened it as well as we could to secure it at present. Captain Courtney and Captain Cook came aboard with other officers, where we considered the conditions the 3 ships were in, their mast and rigging being much damnified in a place where we could get no recruit, that, if we engaged again, we could propose to do no more than what we had already done, which was evidently her no great hurt, because we could perceive few of our shot enter the side to any purpose, and our small arms availed less, there being not a man to be seen above board, that the least thing in the world would bring our mainmast, and likewise the Duchess foremast by the board, either of which by its fall might carry away another mast, and then we should lie a battery for the enemy, having nothing to command our ships with, so that by his heavy guns he might either sink or take us. that if we went aboard her, we should run a great hazard in losing a great many men, with little hopes of success, they having above treble the number aboard to oppose us, and there being now in all our 3 ships not above 120 good men fit for boarding, and those but weak, having been very short of provisions a long time. Besides, we had the disadvantage of netting deck to enter upon, and a ship every other way well provided. So that if we had boarded her, and been forced off, and left any of our men behind, the enemy by that means might have known our strength, and then gone into the harbour, and took possession of the prize in spite of all we could do to prevent it. Besides, our ammunition was very short, having only enough to engage a few glasses longer. All this being seriously considered, and knowing the difficulty we should have to get mast, and the time and provisions we must spend before we could get them fitted, it was resolved to forbear attempting her further, since our battering her signified little, and we had not strength enough to board her. Therefore we agreed to keep her company till night, then to lose her, and make the best of our way into the harbour, to secure the prize we had already took. We engaged first and last about 6 or 7 hours, during all which time we had aboard the Duke but 11 men wounded, 3 of whom were scorched with gunpowder. I was again unfortunately wounded in the left foot with a splinter just before we blew up on the quarter-deck, so that I could not stand, but lay on my back in a great deal of misery, part of my heel bone being struck out, and all under my ankle cut above half through, which bled very much, and weakened me, before it could be dressed and stopped. The Duchess had about 20 men killed and wounded. 3 of the latter and 1 of the former were my men. The Marquis had none killed or wounded, but 2 scorched with powder. The enemy's was a brave, lofty new ship, the Admiral of Manila, and this the first voyage she had made. She was called the Begonia, of about 900 tons, and could carry 60 guns, about 40 of which were mounted, with as many pateroros, all brass. Her complement of men on board, as we are informed, was about 450, besides passengers. They added that 150 of the men on board this great ship were Europeans, several of whom had been formerly pirates, and having now got all their wealth aboard, were resolved to defend it to the last. The gunner, who had a good post in Manila, was an expert man, and had provided the ship extraordinarily well for defence, which made them fight so desperately. They had filled up all between the guns with bales to secure the men. She kept a Spanish flag at her maintop masthead all the time she fought us. We shattered her sails and rigging very much, shot her mizzen yard, killed 2 men out of her tops, which was all the damage we could see we did them, though we could not place less than 500 shot, 6-pounders, in her hull. These large ships were built at Manila with excellent timber, that will not splinter. They have very thick sides, much stronger than we build in Europe. Whilst the officers were aboard us, Captain Courtney and others desired that what we had agreed upon might be put in writing, and signed by as many as were present, to prevent false reflection hereafter, which was done as follows. At a committee held on board the Duke, after we had engaged the bigger Manila ship, December 27, 1709, we, having considered the condition of all our 3 ships, and that our master much damnified in engaging the Manila ship, do think it for the interest of whole to forbear any further attempts upon her, having no probability of taking her, but to do our endeavours to secure the prize we have already took, which will be much more for the honour and interest of ourselves and country. This is our opinion, in witness whereof we have set our hands, the day and year above written. Woodes Rogers, Lancaster Appleby, Stephen Courtney, Charles Pope, William Dampier, Henry Oliphant, Edward Cook, Alexander Selkirk, Robert Fry, John Kingston, Thomas Glendale, Nathan Scotch, John Connolly, John Biller, John Bridge. Thus ended our attempt on the biggest Manila ship, which I have heard related so many ways at home, that I thought it necessary to set down every particular circumstance of it, as it stood in my journal. Had we been together at first and boarded her, we might probably have taken this great prize, but after the enemy had fixed the netting deck and close quarters, they valued us very little. I believe also we might have burnt her with one of our ships, but that was objected against by all officers, because we had goods of value on board all our 3 ships. The enemy was the better provided for us, because they heard at Manila from our English settlements in India that there were 2 small ships fitted from Bristol, that designed to attempt them in the South Seas. This was told by the prisoners we took on board the other ship. When I proposed parting companies at the Tres Marias, and to cruise for the Acapulco, ship from Manila with our ship and bark at one station, and the Duchess and Marquis at another, we then expected but 1 ship from Manila, and she not so well provided as the least ship now was, though as we found it, we might probably have been better asunder, for then I make little question but we should have got some recruit of provisions, and consequently our men had been stronger and better in heart to have boarded this great ship at once, before they had been so well provided. But since Providence or fate will have it as it is, we must be content. December 28. The enemy lay braced all the time the council held, and run out 4 guns of a lower tier, expecting we would have the other brush with her. But when we made sail, she filed and made away west-northwest, and we betwixt the south-southeast and the south close upon a wind. At 6 o'clock we sent the pinnace with some men into the harbour to secure the prize, not knowing what might happen before we could get in with our ships. We unrigged the main top gallant mast, and got it down, securing our mainmast with the runners and tackles every way we could contrive. Had little wind all the afternoon and night, but this morning a fresh breeze sprung up at east-southeast, and soon after we saw nothing more of the great ship. January 1st, after we arrived again at Port Segura, we dispatched the prisoners away in the bark, and likewise the Guiaquil hostages. Having got security for the money as aforesaid, we supplied them with water and provisions enough to carry them to Acapulco, and gave Captain Pitchberty and his chief officers with the padre their clothes, instruments, books, and so on, so that they parted very friendly, and acknowledged we had been very civil to them, of which they desired me to accept the following testimony. We, whose names are hereto subscribed, do acknowledge that ever since we have been in the hands of Captain Woods Rogers and Captain Stephen Courtney, commanders of the Duke and Duchess, 2 British private men of war, we have been by them very civilly treated, and whatsoever we have transacted or done had been voluntary, and by our consent, and particularly in passing bills and obligations through the hands of Sir John Pitchberty for the ransom of town of Guiaquil and other valuable consideration. Witness our hands on the coast of California, January 1st, 1709. Don John Pitchberty, Manuel de Punta, Don Antonio Gutera, Manuel Emanes. I wrote a letter to my owners to acquaint them with our good success, but could not be so full as I would, because I sent it by the hand of an enemy. We spent our time till the 7th in refitting, wooding, and watering, and were very glad to find as much bread on board the prize as we hoped might, with what we had left of our old store, make enough to subsist us in our next long run. Captain Courtney and his officers, with those on board the Marquis, are too willing to compliment Captain Dover with chief command of the prize, which till now I thought he would not have accepted, his post already being above a commander of any of our prizes. But I and my officers are against it, because we believed Captain Fry or others are fitter persons to take charge of her, which we insist on, and Captains Courtney and Cook came to me, where they agreed to a paper that was drawn up while we were all together, in such a manner as I thought would have satisfied every one. Captain Courtney carried this agreement to Captain Dover to sign it, not doubting but all would be content with what we have concluded. Yet, to our surprise, they spent the remainder of the day, and instead of making Captain Dover comply with it, undid all, and brought a paper which empowered him to be sole commander, without the least restraint, of not molesting those that should navigate the ship, but to order everything as he should think fit. January 9th, we fetched our 3 wounded men from on board the Duchess. One of them was Thomas Young, a Welchman, who lost one of his legs. The other, Thomas Evans, a Welchman, whose face was miserably torn. The third, John Gould, wounded in the thigh. And one died of his wounds, viz. Emmanuel Gonsalves, a Portuguese, so that out of 10 that went, only 6 returned safe. I sent a letter to Captain Courtney this morning, to know what measures were going forward, having heard nothing from him since the 7th instant, and desired that there might be no loss of time, but that the committee might meet once more, to try if they would make use of their unbiased reason. They were then aboard the Marquis when I heard they had, ever since our last meeting, concerted how to frame a protest against me and my officers of committee, which was immediately answered by a protest from us, both which are as follows. Know all men, by this presence, that we, the commanders of the ships Duchess and Marquis, and other officers, being the major part of a committee appointed by the owners for the regulating the affairs of the ships Duke and Duchess, private men of war, till they return to Great Britain, as more largely appears in their orders and instructions. Now whereas we have lately taken a rich prize bound from Manila to Acapulco, and the said ship being safe at anchor in a bay near Cape St. Luke, on California, we held the General Committee on board the Duke the 6th day of January 1709-10, for appointing a commander and other officers for the said prize, called by the Spaniards when in their possession Nuestra Señoría del Encarnación de Cingano, but now named by us the Bachelor Frigate, wherein it was carried by majority of votes for Captain Thomas Dover, who came out second captain of the Duke, and president of this committee, and owner of a very considerable part of both ships, Duke and Duchess, to command the said prize. We thinking him the most proper person for the interest of the owners and company. We likewise proposing to put 2 of the best of our officers on board, to command under him, and manage the navigating part of the said ship during a voyage, with other substantial officers of men, sufficient to work the ship and take care of her. Now whereas Captain Woods Rogers, commander of the Duke, and several of his officers, members of this committee, did refuse to sign the agreement of the said committee, the like never having been refused by any before, when carried by majority of voices. To acknowledge the said Captain Thomas Dover, commander of the ship Bachelor Frigate, we do hereby, in the behalf of the owners of the ship Duke and Duchess, ourselves and company, protest against the unadvised proceedings and practice of the said Captain Wood Rogers and the rest of the officers of the committee that refused to sign and agreed to the same, it being directly contrary to the owner's orders and instructions, reference being had thereto, and the union and peace of the ship's company, by them likewise recommended, and whatever damage may ensue, either by loss of time, want of provisions, or men sufficient to manage the said ship, or any mutiny or disagreement that may arise from hence between the ship's companies, or any other disaster whatsoever, and so on, we do likewise protest against, in the behalf of the owners, ourselves and company, as aforesaid, expecting from the said Captain Wood Rogers and officers of the committee aforesaid full satisfaction and reparation of all losses and damages whatsoever that may happen to the said ship during her voyage to Great Britain. In witness whereof, we, the commanders and officers, being the major part of the committee, have set our hands this 9th day of January, 1709-10, on board the Marquis, at anchor near Cape St. Luke on California. Signed by the officers of the Duchess and Marquis. Which protest was answered by another from our ship. We, the chief officers, in behalf of ourselves and rest of the ship's company of the Duke, having taken a rich Spanish prize, in consortship of the Duchess and Marquis, called Nostra Signoria del Encarnacion de Engano, and did design to use the securest method to carry her to Great Britain, both for our employers' interest and our own advantage. But being in a remote part of the world, we offered and desired our consort to put one or more able officers in the principal charge of the aforesaid prize, it being so valuable that a retaliation for all our risks and hardship is in our riches, which highly behoves us to be very careful in preserving. But against all our ship's company's consent, though we are so nearly concerned, our said consort officers, Captain Stephen Courtney, Captain Edward Cook, Captain William Dampier, Mr. William Stratton, Mr. Charles Pope, Mr. John Connolly, Mr. George Milburn, Mr. Robert Norman, Mr. John Bartlett, have signed an instrument and combined together to put Captain T. Dover in command of the said ship. We therefore, being inclined to peace and quietness aboard, and not to use any violence to remove the said Captain Dover out of the aforesaid first command, although he is utterly incapable of the office, do hereby publicly protest against the aforesaid commander, and every one of those that have already or shall hereafter combine to place him in. The ship now being in a safety, we declare against all damages that may arise or accrue to the said ship or cargo under his command, and that the aforesaid combiners, who have put the care of the said ship under an incapable command, we expect are accountable and liable to us for all damages that may happen. This is our public protest. Witness our hands aboard the said ship Duke, riding at anchor in a port of California, the 9th of January, 1709-10, signed by the officers of the Duke. 'Twas our great unhappiness, after taking a rich prize, to have a paper war amongst ourselves. I am sorry to trouble the reader with this dispute, which continued for 2 days about a proper commander for this prize, because it highly concerned us to take the utmost precautions for our safety, having a long run through a dangerous unknown passage into the East Indies, and most of the recompense for our great risk and hardship lay in our riches. I had always desired that Captain Dover might be aboard her, for being a considerable owner, we all agree he was a very proper person to take care of a cargo, and to have all the freedom and accommodation that should be made for him in that ship, which was of such vast consequences to us and to our employers, that in their instructions to me, they strictly charged me to use the securest method to bring us safe home, in case we should be so fortunate as we are to take one of the Acapulco ships. So that after the protests were over on both sides, I desired they might assemble together and finally determine what the majority would agree on, that no time might be lost. So all the council met again on board the Bachelor to endeavour on accommodation. I, being very weak and in much pain, was not able to stir, therefore sent my opinion in writing as follows. My opinion is, that 'tis not for the safety of the rich Spanish prize, that Captain Dover commander, because his temper is so violent, that capable men cannot well act under him, and himself is incapable. Our owner directed me to use the securest method to bring the ship home, if we should have the good fortune to take her, and 'tis not so, if an ignorant person have the command. And though it may be pretended that he will not command the sailing part, there are other parts necessary for a commander, so that whosoever has the charge of one ought to act wholly in the rest, or else confusion follows the mixed commands, that would be very pernicious in this case, and which it highly concerns us to be aware of. I am content and desired Captain Dover might be aboard, and have power to take care of the cargo, and all the liberty and freedom in her he can in reason otherwise desire, and that none may have the like power on board the prize but himself. This is my opinion. January 9, 1709, 10. Woodes Rogers. This dispute is against my desire already put in print, from the public notes of the voyage, otherwise I have left it wholly out of my journal, as I had done several other of our differences, being unwilling to trouble the reader with the contest that too often happened in the government of our sailing commonwealth. After a long debate, they voted Mr. Fry and Mr. Stretton both to act in equal post to take charge of the navigating the ship, though under Captain Dover, but they were to be no ways molested, hindered, nor contradicted in their business by him, whose duty it was to see that nothing should be done contrary to the interest of the owners and ship's companies, in nature of an agent, almost in the same manner I proposed at first, only he had the title of chief captain in that ship, which was so small a difference, where titles are so common, that we all consented to it. And at the same time they chose officers, agreeing that we should put 30 men aboard her, the Duchess 25, and the Marquis 13, which with 36 Manila Indians, called Lascars, and other prisoners we have left, her complement will be about 110 men. The majority keeping to their first agreement, I was obliged to come into it, according to my instructions from our owners, so that all our differences about this affair were at an end, and we drank to our safe arrival in Great Britain. The council agreed as follows. At a council held on board the Bachelor frigate, at anchor in Port Segura on California, January 10, 1709, 10. It is agreed by the majority of this council that Captain Robert Fry and Captain William Stretton shall both act in equal post in the sole navigating, sailing, and engaging, if occasion should be, under Captain Thomas Dover on board the Bachelor frigate, and that the said Captain Thomas Dover shall not molest, hinder, or contradict them in their business. And we do appoint Alexander Selkirk, master; Joseph Smith, chief mate; Benjamin Parsons, second mate; Charles May, surgeon; John Jones, carpenter; Robert Hollinsby, boatswain; Richard Beekhouse, gunner; Pierce Bray, cooper; James Stretton and Richard Hickman, midshipmen; Dennis Redding, steward; and all other inferior officers, as the commander shall think fit. Signed by the majority of our council. In the morning we put 35 good hands aboard her. The Duchess and Marquis put no more than their share. Meanwhile Captains Courtney and Cook, and 2 or 3 more of the committee came to me, where we signed the paper for Captain Dover and 2 commanders, recommending peace and tranquillity amongst them, and that in case of separation, the place of rendezvous was to be Guam, one of the Ladrones Islands, where we designed to touch at, God willing, to get provisions. Everything being thus settled and all in readiness to sail, before I proceed with the relations of our voyage from hence, I shall give an account of California. California described. It is not yet certainly known whether it be an island or joins to the continent, nor did our time or circumstances allow us to attempt the discovery. I heard from Spaniards that some of their nation had sailed as far up betwixt California and the Main as latitude 42 north, where meeting with shoal water and abundance of islands, they durst not venture any further. So that if this be true, in all probability it joins to the continent a little further to the northward, for shoal water and islands is a general sign of being near some mainland. But the Spaniards, having more territories in this part of the world than they know how to manage, they are not curious of further discoveries. The Manila ships bound to Acapulco often make this coast in the latitude of 40 north, and I never heard of any that discovered it farther to the northward. Some will draft make it to join to the land of Hesso, but all this being yet undetermined, I shall not take upon me to affirm whether it's an island or joins to the continent. The Dutch say they formerly took a Spanish vessel in those seas, which had sailed round California, and found it to be an island, but this account can't be depended on, and I choose to believe it joins to the continent. There is no certain account of its shape or bigness, and having seen so little of it, I shall refer the reader to our common draft for its situation. What I can say of it from my own knowledge is that the land where we were is for the most part mountainous, barren and sandy, and had nothing but a few shrubs and bushes, which produce fruits and berries of several sorts. Our men who went in our bark to view the country about 15 leagues to the northward say it was there covered with tall trees. The Spaniards tell us of several good harbours in this country, but we found none of them near this cape. We frequently saw smoke in several places, which makes us believe the inhabitants are pretty numerous. The bay where we rode had but very indifferent anchoring ground in deep water, and is the worst recruiting place we met with since I came out. The wind at this time of the year generally blowing overland, make it good riding on the starboard side of the bay, where you ride on the bank that has from 10 to 25 fathom water, but the rest of that bay is very deep, and near the rocks on the larboard side going in there is no ground. During the time of our stay, the air was serene, pleasant, and healthful, and we had no strong gales of wind, very little rain, but great dews fell by night, when 'twas very cold. The natives we saw here were about 300. They had large limbs, were straight, tall, and of a much blacker complexion than any other people that I had seen in the South Seas. Their hair long, black and straight, which hung down to their thighs. The men stark naked, and the women had a covering of leaves over their privities, or little clouts made of silk grass, or the skins of birds and beasts. All of them we saw were old and miserably wrinkled. We supposed they were afraid to let any of their young ones come near us, but needed not, for besides the good order we kept among our men in that respect, if we may judge by what we saw, they could not be very tempting. The language of the natives was as unpleasant to us as their aspect, for it was very harsh and broad, and they pronounced it so much in the throat, as if their words had been ready to choke them. I designed to have brought 2 of them away with me, in order to have had some account of the country, when they had learned so much of our language as to enable them to give it, but being short of provisions, I durst not venture it. Some of them wear pearls around their arms and necks, having first notched it round, and fastened it with a string of silk grass, for I suppose they knew not how to bore them. The pearls were mixed with little red berries, sticks, and bits of shells, which they looked upon to be so fine an ornament that though we had the glass beads of several colors and other toys, they would accept none of them. They coveted nothing we had but knives and other cutting instruments, and were so honest that they did not meddle with our coopers' or carpenters' tools, so that whatever was left ashore at night, we found it untouched in the morning. We saw nothing like European furniture or utensils among them. Their huts were very low, and made of branches of trees and reeds, but not sufficiently covered to keep out rain. They had nothing like gardens or provisions about them. They subsisted chiefly on fish while we were here, which, with the miserableness of their huts, they seemed only to be made for a time, made us conclude they had no fixed habitation here, whatever they may have elsewhere, and that this was their fishing season. We saw no nets or hooks, but wooden instruments with which they strike the fish very dexterously, and dive to admiration. Some of our sailors told me they saw one of them dive with his instrument, and whilst he was under water, put up his striker with a fish on the point of it, which was taken off by another that watched by him on a bark log. The reader may believe of this what he pleases, but I give it the more credit, because I myself threw some rusty knives overboard, on purpose to try those divers, who seldom missed catching a knife before it could sink about 3 or 4 fathoms, which I took to be an extraordinary proof of their agility. Instead of bread, they used a little black seed, which they ground with the stones, and eat by handfuls. Some of our men thicken their broth with it, and say it tastes somewhat like coffee. They have some roots that eat like yam, a sort of seeds that grow in cuts, and taste like green peas, a berry which resembles those of ivy, and being dried at the fire, eats like parched peas. They have another like a large currant, with a white tarnished pulp, a stone, and a kernel. This sort of fruits they seem to value very much. They have also a fruit which grows on the prickle pear tree, tastes like gooseberry, and make good sauce. They have many other seeds and plants unknown to us, but I was not in a condition to view or describe them. They seem to have a season of hunting by the skin of deer, and so on, we saw among them. They paid a sort of respect to one man whose head was adorned with feathers made up in the form of cap. In other respects they seemed to have all things in common, for when they exchanged fish with us for old knives, of which we had plenty, they gave the knives to any that stood next, and after they had enough, we could get no fish from them. They appeared to be very idle, and seemed to look after no more than a present subsistence. They stood and looked upon our men very attentively, while they cut wood and filled water, but did not care to lend us a hand at either, and indeed to do anything that required hard labor. Their arms are bows and arrows with which they can shoot birds flying. Their bows are about 7 foot long, and of a tough pliant wood unknown to us, with strings of silk grass. Their arrows about 4.5 feet, made of cane, and pointed with fish bones that they shave for the purpose. Most of their knives and other cutting instruments are made of shark teeth. I saw 2 or 3 large pearls in their necklaces and bracelets, and the Spaniard told me they had a store of them from the inner part of the Gulf of California, where they had missionaries planted among them. Our men told me they saw heavy shining stones ashore, which looked as if they came from some mineral, but they did not inform me of this till we were at sea, otherwise I would have brought some of them to try what metal could be extracted out of them. The Spaniard likewise informed me that the country in general within, on mainland of Mexico, is pleasant and fruitful, and abounds with cattle and provisions of all sorts. The natives grew very familiar with us, and came frequently aboard to view our ships, which they mightily admired. We saw no boats or canoes among them, nor any other sailing craft, but bark logs, which they steered with paddles at each end. We gave one of the natives a shirt, but he soon tore it in pieces and gave it to the rest of his company to put the seeds in which they used for bread. We saw no utensils for cookery about them, nor do I suppose they have any, for they bury their fish in a heap of sand, and make a fire over it, till they think it fit for eating. There were all the fishes usual in those seas to be found in the bay. The fresh water here is good, and they have abundance of samphire. They make a fire in the middle of their huts, which are very low and smoky. We saw no extraordinary birds here. I am told by our people that have been ashore that they get fire by rubbing two dry sticks against each other, as customary among the wild Indians. The entrance into the harbor may be known by 4 high rocks, which look like the needles at the Isle of Wight, as you come from the westward, the 2 westernmost in form of sugar loaves. The innermost has an arch like a bridge, through which the sea makes its way. You must leave the outermost rock about the cable's length on the larboard side, and steer into the deepest part of the bay, being all bold, where you may anchor from 10 fathom to 20 or 25 fathom water. Here you ride landlocked from east by north, back to the southeast by south. Yet it is but an ordinary road, if the wind should come strong out of the sea, which it never did while we lay there. End of section 15.